Hi, I'm Titus, Chief Technical Officer and founder of PathSolutions. I'm now going to do a demo of our RemoteView remote worker troubleshooting solution. So going into RemoteView, the first thing we're going to start with is running the agent. Now, you can just click to download the agent. That's what I'm going to do in a moment. But in general, when you're working with a remote user, you're going to click email link. And the email link pops an email and it allows you to send this to your user, and it gives them basic instructions on how to download and run the agent. Now, in our case, we don't need to. I'm just going to go ahead and download and run the agent. Now, again, this is a single executable, so there's no installation required, no uninstallation. So when it starts, it's just going to start off with a batch test. And what this means is you can choose the batch test or use the default test. I'm just going to click start as if I was a non-technical user, and it's going to go through and do its batch test. At this point, it's running a set of tests that I, as the engineer, want this remote user to do. We can minimize that, come back here and say, okay, let's look at those tests. So I can go and find the user. I can find the various different tests that were run. I can go into any group of those tests and say, okay, part of that batch was to get a system version. We can click on this. Here's the results. Okay, I can see it's Windows 10 with the full version. I can see process lists and see what's running on this box. Is it healthy? DNS lookup. So you can target the user's default DNS, or you can have the user perform various different DNS lookups against different servers to see what those responses are and have the full details of that DNS lookup. Because sometimes the user's DNS lookup is going to say, oh, this is the problem. You're actually looking up against a different DNS server, therefore getting different results. Here's an end-to-end test. So we were looking to see what sort of quality we get against this target. And we can see that we have we're sending out a simulated phone call. So we're doing an end-to-end test. We're getting some good MOS scores down here. We have no packet loss. Our jitter seems to be reasonable. Latency is reasonable. We don't have any out of order, but we're not getting any DSCP tag back. Okay, that's fine. We're not expecting that across the internet. So there's all sorts of different tests that can be run. You can have users do manual tests, for example. Here's a web screenshot. This is valuable because sometimes the user will say, well, I'm seeing this screen and I'm describing it this way. And you're thinking, well, look in the upper left corner. Is there a button there? No, there's no button there. I mean, that makes it the most difficult thing to troubleshoot. If you could see what they were seeing, so you tell them, go do a screenshot. It's going to go and fetch a screenshot so that you can see and say, oh, this is what you're looking at. I got to tell you, this is something that I would have died for years ago, because there are so many times when a user starts describing a screen and you're just thinking, that sounds so bizarre. It sounds so wrong as to what they should be seeing. And yet, when you finally see the screenshot, you realize, oh, they're going through a proxy server, and the proxy server is blocking the connection, and that proxy server has its own splash page that they're just not understanding why it's looking that way. If you have web speed problems, if somebody's saying, gee, this web page is just crawling and I need some help finding out what's going on, rather than having to talk them through how to generate a HAR file, we just say, do a web waterfall fetch. This will end up telling you that looks like most of the time was pulling that first page. And if we look at this, it took 2.3 seconds where the connection was stalled. We're not even getting the connection to go through. Okay, maybe there is a proxy or a firewall problem here. The rest of the page seemed to come up quick. If these were slow, then you might have a content problem. There's a content management server out there, or you can find out it's a DNS issue, or find out that an ASP.NET page is really slow, or a JSON page is really slow to pull. It might be a database issue. So this means you can diagnose what's going on with web page fetches. You can have users do wireless tests and say, okay, so here's an example of a wireless test that was done at my home earlier. And again, I can walk through and say, okay, at this point in time, it was really bad. I can see it was the 8th, it was 3:33 and 24 seconds as to when that was really bad. What room were you in? You can see SSIDs for different locations. For example, this is a house in Aptos that I rented for Thanksgiving to be socially distant from everyone. So we rented an Airbnb, and we could say, okay, what's going on at that site? Here are all of the neighborhood SSIDs. We can see the signal strengths, radio types, what channels were in use, and say, okay, who's all using channel 1? Because that's what I was connected to. Okay, looks like this one is also using the same channel. There's definitely some channel contention there. We probably ought to consider using a different channel and see which ones are not used in that neighborhood. So with all this information able to be automatically collected via that agent, it means that you can do all your remote troubleshooting and you don't have to do a remote connection. You don't even have to schedule the time with the user. So you don't need to have a meeting. You just tell them, go run the agent, have it collect the information, send it back. I'll analyze it once it comes in. Now, the tests that can be performed, I'm going to go back to the agent here. So this is a short test, but effectively what we can do is we can program multiple tests. And I'll apologize that I didn't have multiple tests set in example, but you can say, I want this to be a continuous test. I want this to be every 1 hour, I want it to do this type of test. So you choose the batch test script that you want it to run, and then it will do that script on according to the script's rules, and then send the data back. So you can have level 1 diagnostic where it does everything. You can have a level 4 diagnostic where every 5 minutes it's doing a quick latency test, or it's doing a trace route test. So you can really program that to be whatever you like it to be.
Has this been, or are you able to tie into an existing directory store?
So we do synchronize with Active Directory. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I was just curious how you sort of got people's emails and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
And how customizable are the various tests?
So you can program whatever you want for each of these tests. I guess give me some examples and I'll be able to respond.
Oh, obviously we've got PowerShell and the like, but let's say we have customer specific applications on there. Can we have the tests execute those applications and pull a measure back on how long they take to run and things like that?
So it's not going to run local applications unless you can do that through PowerShell or through a command line. So it's not going to act as a user that way. But if it is a web application, then you've got all of the web, web waterfall test, web latency test, screenshot test, all of that you can end up having as part of a script to be able to collect what is the user seeing here as far as performance for this web page fetch.
Okay, but if it's a CLI application that has regular text output that we can execute through PowerShell, we can incorporate that.
Correct. Okay. I'm going to talk about WebRTC. So WebRTC, I'm going to first of all say this is not going to work on my computer simply because my screen and audio are already being used by an application to do what we're currently doing right now. But what I can do is effectively show you an example of this on another laptop I have, where I will have it connect and show that what it will do is it will show a reflection of my computer. So I can see latency, jitter, loss, frames per second, throughput, all of that, and yet this is done through a browser. And so you don't need any agent or client because it's using the browser as the agent or client, meaning that you can use a Chromebook, you can use a phone, you can use a tablet, and effectively use this as a reflector, and it will tell you, here's what your latency is, here's what your jitter, here's what your packet loss is. And right now we're currently setting up servers. This is going to be released very soon, so when we have all of this released, we're going to have multiple servers around the nation to be able to say, let's test against Chicago, let's test against Seattle, let's test against New Jersey, and find out what is your stability of connections to each of these servers, so that you can determine, is it a problem that is regional focused? Is it a problem that is limited to a certain connection? So it allows you to determine, without having any agent, what is the stability.
Tim, the WebRTC connection can only be initiated from the executable on the workstation back to the client, and there's not like a TSR that runs in the background that I can continue to use, correct? Like once I close the executable, the WebRTC session is closed as well, correct?
There is no executable, so I want to be clear on that. So WebRTC uses the browser. When you close the browser, there is nothing going on. So okay. There is no resident. If we're connect here and we do this, it's going to be while we're up, while the web browser is up. If I close the web browser, there's nothing in the background, but this can effectively be run and continuously run, so that if you want to see what happened 20 minutes ago, what happened 5 minutes ago, you can say, gee, we had a huge latency spike, or we had a huge jitter spike, or frames per second drop because our CPU spiked. So you'll have all of that history to be able to diagnose what's going on.
It's definitely given us some stuff to think about here, because as an infrastructure guy, I'm mostly looking at things from the perspective of the path between the user and what they're trying to get to. The user experience itself has usually been someone else's problem, but more and more, as we get more and more remote workers, I'm getting dragged into it. So this is kind of interesting.
With this being, you're getting your remote troubleshooting, you're getting the information remotely. Does this also, or can this replace the sort of whatever the remote control solution of choice is for a particular IT organization? Would this be like a one-stop shop for, hey, we bring in PathSolutions, we can see what's going on, we can test what's going on, and our IT administrator can use this to potentially fix problems remotely? Or is that still separate from this?
That is still separate. So you're still going to want to have a remote control solution. But the question really is that if you say, oh, I have a remote control solution, I don't need this, I will ask, what happens when you can't remote control connect to the user's computer because their network is too poor quality? Or what happens if you do connect and say, okay, great, I'm now on the user's machine. I would love to be able to see what is my latency out to this site with a G711 phone call. Oh, I have to install tools. Now you realize that you're missing a tool set to be able to do that type of troubleshooting, to be able to say, I want to see what the RSSID and see what the signal strength is of the wireless environment. I want to see what neighboring channels are being used to determine, are we having a good wireless environment or not? So it's really is that what we figured is, this is not replacing remote control. What this is doing is making it so that if you can't connect to remote control, this will solve your problem. And also, it's going to be a very rich tool set to be able to do that remote troubleshoot. And also, usually with remote control, you have to schedule a meeting with the user to be able to do it. In our case, you don't have to schedule it. You just tell the user, at your convenience, run this tool. When it finishes its tests, I'm going to be notified so I can review the results.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Now I see this all reporting back to TotalView, and RemoteView is really cool, but I can't help but feel that this is only one small tool in the toolbox. Can you expand a little bit on what else you've got reporting back to TotalView from different pieces of the network other than the end user?
So TotalView is a complete network monitoring and management system. So there's automation tools for backing up switches, routers, firewalls. There is network diagramming. There is root cause troubleshooting of VoIP issues. We look into QoS queues. We collect 19 error counters of information off of every interface in the infrastructure. So it's a lot more depth and breadth of information than a lot of other monitoring solutions. And yet, really, our core principle has been reduce management overhead. And so reducing management overhead of the monitoring tool is automate, automate, automate. So we have built in a ton of automation into the solution so that we can automatically find switches, routers, gateways in the environment, automatically start monitoring them, automatically tell you about, hey, this interface just changed status and you want to know about it because there's actually another network device connected here. This is part of my infrastructure. So you're not out spending a lot of time managing your monitoring solution. You figure you're able to start solving problems because you know what your network equipment knows.
Okay, so this is essentially the whole toolbox, and we're just looking at one wrench right now. So there's a lot more to look into.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
And are you able to correlate information between what I'm getting from the remote view and if, say, I'm having problems with a VPN concentrator on premises or some kind of network infrastructure on premises that remote users are trying to access? Are you able to tie all that together?
So we don't automatically put that together, but because we have more depth of information on the network than a lot of other monitoring solutions, we're able to get you a lot closer, a lot faster. One of the big limitations I find with a lot of monitoring solutions that exist on the market is that they monitor only a few interfaces on the network and they only look at one, maybe two error counters on the interface. So they don't really know the health of the interface. It's really the saddest joke in the fact that you could have an interface that should be running gig that's actually running 100 meg half duplex, dropping a bunch of packets due to collisions, and your monitoring software is going to say the network is healthy. We figure if you dug deeper in an automated fashion, that information would be brought up and you could be made alerted to the fact that this interface is maxing out its utilization and dropping a ton of packets due to it running half duplex.
And guaranteed backdoor free?
So something, yes. I will admit to you, being a CISSP, I cannot guarantee it is backdoor free, but I can tell you by our security practices and our design principle that it is a lot easier for us to secure this than other products. And here's why. What we've done is we use very few external DLLs. And what I mean by that is our core service has 12, count them, 12 DLLs. And that means that we are far easier able to secure our code than a lot of other manufacturers that might have 400 or maybe even 1,000 DLLs that they have to validate, test, and determine what's going on. So we are very picky about what DLLs we use when it comes to building the software, meaning there's far less externalities and far less problems. So this means you're getting more reliable code, and that reduces our need for putting out multiple patches, the need for doing bug fixes for all sorts of esoteric things have already been done. So it just means more reliable, stable code.
Tim, of the customers you have using this, do you have a sense of how many of them are just using it for sort of post hoc troubleshooting, like if an end user reports a problem, or trying to be proactive and anticipate and get out in front of potential end user issues?
So since this is so new, right now, what we've done with our beta test group is they've gone out and just done ad hoc. And so they figure they have some users that have been screaming for a long period of time, and they're using that to solve those specific problems, get those behind them. And really, I expect in the next month or so that they're going to start moving more towards the proactive, simply because that's the desired direction. I think everyone's still in firefighting mode regarding a lot of the problems with these home networks.
Yeah, I mean, just getting any kind of visibility at this point is helpful.
That's what caused us to build it.
And I guess we talked about licensing a little bit earlier, but is this available as a standalone product from PathSolutions, or do I need to buy the whole PathSolutions suite and I get this as part of it? How does that work?
So it is available as a standalone. We do have discounts for folks who are already customers who are using the core. So there's a benefit to getting the core, obviously. but it is available as a standalone. There's really, what we've decided to do is make it so that you can cover your entire infrastructure. And what we have is we have two different levels of offering. We have a business level of offering based upon the size of your network, and that's effectively all you can eat for that size of business. And then there's an enterprise, which is all you can eat for an enterprise size of customer. So we divvy it up based upon the size of the customer, which is a little bit like an all-you-can-eat buffet where there's a kid price and then there's an adult price. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for your time. If you want to learn more about the product, please visit us, www.PathSolutions.com. Again, we're engineers. We're trying to help solve problems for other engineers, and we figure if we can make it easy and make it fast, then you can look like the genius on your network.